Good afternoon, friends. Tuesday, April 12th. It is the 11th of Nisan, which, by the way, an important day on the calendar. This day, 120 years ago, was the birth of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson.
Wow.
120 years ago. He passed away again in 1994 at the age of 92. And
Wow.
in the modern world, it would be hard to find many others who we could attribute so much impact for the Jewish world and for the Jewish community. And I think the Rebbe left a legacy of caring for others and caring for others, even if we're different than each other. The Rebbe was very highly valued scholarship. And the Rebbe actually, very interestingly, encouraged people to write and to publish and to write memoirs. And the Rebbe felt strongly that everyone has a story and people have something to contribute. And so he would encourage everyone to find the area where they can put something, into the universe and do so. Rebbe encouraged people to value and celebrate every individual win instead of looking at success or failure. And instead of only celebrating the big picture, we have to be able to celebrate an individual moment. Person has a struggle and they push through. Person works hard on a project and they succeed. They should allow themselves to feel the value and the thrill and the joy of that success. And the ability to celebrate every win and individual wins is, I think, an important idea in psychology, but it's also to the Rebbe, it was real. And so if a person does something good and something right, and they come more in tune with the angels within, a person doesn't have to say, oh, I have problems. No, celebrate in the moment, celebrate your triumph. And by doing so, I believe the Rebbe felt that by fortifying our own successes and celebrating with others, it helps feed our appetite and helps us accomplish more and more. And I think that's also a very, in a way obvious, but also very important teaching that not everybody, certainly in the Jewish world, not everyone gets it. A lot of people think it's all or nothing. And it's not about all or nothing. Every moment is precious. And every moment of getting something right or doing something good or helping another person, that's worthy of celebration on its own. And that's it. And now we're going to share the screen and we're going to study the book of Samuel. The book of Samuel, of course, is the story of the prophet Samuel, the first king, Saul. And now we are getting into the story of King David. He's not yet a king. He's a fugitive on the run. But just before, last week, we read that there was a degree of peace made between David and Saul. And I don't know about you, but that made me feel very good, because it's really awkward, this fight, father-in-law, son-in-law, two people that really have their values very much aligned. And there's, as the words of the text of Samuel, the book of the prophets, that there was a dark cloud that descended upon him, that causes the king to be not in his right mind or his best mind, and it causes him to be paranoid and fearful of David. And it's so nice that there was a moment where David is able to break through that cloud and through the darkness, and if not for a moment, a peace and a truce between them, if not more. And Saul, in his humility, acknowledges that David is right and he's in the wrong. But now we encounter David on the run, not on the run, but he's wandering with a group of men, and they're very hungry because they've been on the run. And even though they patched things up with Saul, they didn't quite have a home base. And there was a very, very well-to-do magnate, or what do we call them now? An oligarch called Naval, very well-to-do man. And they're hoping that he'll be able to help them out. Now, not that he owed them anything, but in Judaism, there's a value of helping the needy. And I guess King David, as a general, a protector of the people, and as a future king, maybe his folks felt that, you should be gracious to them. And the man, Naval, instead of being gracious, basically was very rude. So David is in the wilderness and he hears of Nabal married to Abigail. Abigail is a beautiful, intelligent, and righteous person. Nabal, her husband, not so much. And so David sends 10 men and he says, please greet Nabal in my name as a rising star of the Jewish people. wish him well, and ask him for help. Ask him to feed our hungry, famished, almost collapsing warriors. And his response, instead of saying, yes, I'll help you, is, who is this David? Who is the son of Jesse? Is he another runaway slave? Very crass, very rude, very inappropriate to King David. Should I take my bread and my water, the meat that I slaughter for my own shares? Should I take away from my own people to give you, strangers that I don't know? And of course, the assertion here is that he had he had much resources, and he easily could have afforded to help them. And again, the reason why I don't know what to do with this text is because I don't know what to do with the text, as we'll see. It's a little bit different than things that we've read until now, because there's a degree of entitlement being presented here, and I'm not sure how to square it, how to make sense of it. I'm sure we could try to figure out, maybe as a chieftain, as a warrior, as a protector, he was entitled to it, or maybe he wasn't entitled to it, but in great need, they were willing to do what it takes to protect his men. And so the young men return to David, and they report with this rude, ungracious rejection. So David tells his men, gird your swords. We're going to do battle.
Aye.
And that, again, this is where I don't quite understand. Maybe there was a sense of rebellion against the king. Now that David's back in the good graces of Saul, maybe there was some kind of social contract. Again, I'm thinking out loud. Maybe there was a social contract that says that to live with the protection of the king, you need to provide for his men when they're traveling through your area. And so maybe there was some kind of contractual or ethical obligation that this man has. And if he's not going to provide, well, then he is going to see the wrong side of the law, if you will. So he tells his men, gird on your swords, take your swords. Each man put on their swords, David too. 400 men went after David, while 200 remained with the baggage. So now David has 600 men, 400 that move forward, and 200 that have a defensive position guarding the resources they currently have. One of Nabal's young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, that David had sent messengers from the wilderness to greet their master, and then he spurned them. So one of the men who worked for Nabal ratted on her husband to Abigail. But the men were very friendly to us. We were not harmed, nor did we miss anything all the time we went about with them while we were in the open. So the guy says, Abigail, these are not bad people. These are good people. They were a wall about us by night and by day. The time that we were tending flock, apparently there was a degree of protection that they provided. They guarded us. So carefully consider what you should do, for harm threatens our master and all his household. He is such a nasty fellow. He's talking to the lady about her husband, that no one can speak to him. Abigail quickly got together 200 loaves of bread, 2 jars of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seah of parched corn, 100 cakes of raisins, 200 cakes of pressed figs. She loaded them on asses, on donkeys. So Abigail is going to right the wrong.
How did she have 200? Wait a minute. How did she have 200 loaves of bread?
Well, it seems like she was quite an affluent, they were quite an affluent, prosperous family. And at a time, most of the resources were in this currency, if you will. And apparently she was able to muster a large amount of food, 200 loaves of bread.
Superwoman.
Sounds like it, right?
She's a balabust.
A real balabusta. A real balabusta.
Yeah.
And she told the young men, go ahead of me, I'll follow you. But she didn't tell her husband Nabal. Obviously, they had some marital problems. She was riding on the ass, going down a trail on the hill when David and his men appeared, coming towards her, and she met them. So she basically is being very gracious, but she's also protecting her husband, who's going to get a whooping if they don't, because of his rudeness, his disrespect, and rejecting King David, his men. And I guess, again, my theory, now once again deputized by Saul to both protect and be provided for. David had been saying, it was all for nothing that I protected that fellow's possessions in the wilderness, and then nothing he owed is missing. He has paid me back evil for good. So David is saying, we've done so much, we've protected them, and all we're asking is the common courtesy to help his men not starve to death. May God do thus and thus to the enemies of David. By the light of the morning, I leave a single. He's basically, David is getting his men ready to really give them a whooping. When Abigail saw David, she dismounted from her donkey. She threw herself down for David, bowing to the ground. So Abigail's going to save the day. Prostrate at his feet, she said, please, let the blame be mine, my lord. But let your handmaid speak to you. Hear your maids, please. She wants to have David's ear to try to protect her folks. Please, my lord, pay no attention to that wretched fellow Nabal, my husband. For he is what his name says, a boor. He is a boor. Nabal in Hebrew means a unsophisticated boor. Your handmaiden did not see the young men whom my lord sent. I didn't know that you sent for food. If I would have known, of course I would provide for you. I swear, my lord, as the Lord lives and as you live, the Lord who has kept you from seeking redress by blood with your own hands, let your enemies, all who will harm my lord, fare like Nabal. She's basically taking a very strong stance against her husband. Here is the present your maidservant has brought my lord. Let it be given to your men who are following my lord, meaning give it, provide for all your warriors. Please pardon your maid's boldness. The Lord will grant my lord an enduring house. And she's now blessing him with it to start a new dynasty, a new line of kings, because my lord is fighting the battles of the Lord. No wrong is ever to be found in you. She's saying, you're right. We're wrong. Please forgive us. Please don't destroy everyone and everything.
So if the husband was such a bore, why was she protecting him?
Well, she's not just protecting him. She's protecting herself and she's protecting the household.
The household, right.
Yeah, so she must feel a sense of responsibility to defend and protect.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone sets out to pursue you and seek your life, the life of my Lord will be bound up in the bundle of life in the care of the Lord, but he will fling away the lives of your enemies as from the hollows of a sling. So a very poetic way that she's saying she's absolutely confident that you're going to be victorious, successful, and no one will be able to stand against you.
So then she had some inkling that he was going to be the next king?
Everyone must have known. It was probably in all the,
because she was bowing down to him. So
yeah, she understood that this guy is the next rising star. And she realizes it's bad business to get on his bad side just as he's on the ascent.
Right.
And so she is a clever, savvy balabusta. And when the Lord has accomplished for my Lord all the good he has promised you and appointed you leader, do not let this cause of stumbling or faltering courage to my Lord. You shed blood needlessly, and that my Lord sought redress with his own hands. When the Lord has prospered, my Lord, remember your maid. Basically, she says, I know you're on the rise. And one day you're going to be incredibly victorious and you're going to be the big cheese. Let's not leave this unpleasant. Let's not let this unpleasant event mar your rise to power. Let's make this, let's just move this all over. Don't let my husband's misdeeds be a stain on all of us. And can you just forgive us, please? And David tells Abigail, praise be the Lord, God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. Thank God you came in. Thank you for your prudence. Blessed be you yourself for restraining me from seeking redress and blood by my own hand. So David they're starving, they're indignant, and they're ready to spill blood. And Abigail, ever the diplomat, the balabusta, not only provides, but very tactfully convinces David to halt his attack. Sure as the Lord God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, had you not come quickly to meet me, not a single male of Nabal's line would have been left till daybreak. So David is like, if you wouldn't have come here, I would have destroyed Nabal and all of his descendants. So it's a good thing. You really did good, he tells her. David accepted what she brought, and he said to her, go home safely. See, I heeded your plea and respected your wish. So you asked me not to attack, I won't attack. What do you think Nabal was doing? So again, David asked for food. Nabal says, no way, who are you, you slave, you nobody. David is really enraged and he wants to attack. Now, Abigail brings food, he feeds them and convinces David to stand down. Abigail comes home. He was having a feast with his house, a feast fit for a king. Nabal was in a merry mood, very drunk, so she didn't tell him anything until daybreak.
And there was enough food left for him. She's a real
Yeah. There was even more food. The next morning, when Nabal slept off the wine, his wife told him everything that had happened, and his courage died within him. he became like stone. He was devastated that his estate provided for and fed David. And he was so utterly depressed, he became physically sick. And within 10 days,
He
the
was
Lord
dead.
struck Nabal and he died. So Nabal dies within
Mhm.
10 days.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Does David marry Abigail?
Let's find out.
The plot thickens.
Let's find out.
Oh.
You are good. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Praise be the Lord who championed my cause against the insults of Nabal and held back his servant from wrongdoing. The Lord has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his head."
Mm-hmm.
He got his just punishment. David sent messengers to propose marriage to Abigail to take her as his wife.
See? Oh my.
Wow, Lynn, you're good.
I guessed
You're
that.
good.
I guessed it. Believe me, I didn't read it.
Very good. When David's servants came to Abigail at Carmel, told her David had sent them to make her his wife, which in Hebrew really means to convince her to come.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately bowed low. And by the way, based on the original conversation, you could tell there was some kind of affinity, let's say, between them. And she immediately bowed low, her face in the ground, and said, "Your handmaid is ready to be your maidservant to wash the feet of my Lord's servants." She says, "I'll be happy to be a servant in your team. And certainly, what an honor to be married."
Oh, so she agrees to the marriage then. Right?
Abigail rose quickly, mounted an ass with 5 of her maids in attendance. She follows David's messengers, and she became his wife. You can imagine there are probably a few steps in between, but
What
for
a
the
nice
sake of
story.
brevity, we get down to the point, and they are now married. Wow.
What a beautiful story.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So now David had taken Ahinoam of Jezreel.
Ah.
So this is his second wife.
This is at least his second wife, yes. It looks like he
Well,
had.
in those days, they had polygamy, right? In those days.
Yeah. But it's I'm trying to figure out. Hold on, it's a little complicated here.
Mm-hmm.
Give me
He
a
was
moment.
married to Saul's daughter.
He marries Saul's daughter. He's married to
Right.
me. He's married to Abigail,
Yeah.
and he was also married to someone called Ahinoam, apparently.
So he has 3 wives, right?
Yeah, but the story gets bad. In 5 minutes, I'm gonna have to go. But the story.
Just when it gets good.
Hold on. So let's cram in a little bit because the story gets bad. Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Palti, son of Laish from Galim. Saul pawned off, gave away, whatever that means, David's wife to someone else.
How could he do that? How did he do that?
Hello?
I'm sorry, I'm just reading some. So remember when this scholarly commentaries want to make sense of this story.
Mm-hmm.
Say there probably were some mechanics where either Saul forced a divorce or Saul as king had certain latitude that normally didn't exist. But
Yeah,
something is up.
This whole idea that Saul had given his daughter, David's wife, to somebody else. I mean, where does the woman? There's no rights.
What he did is not right.
No, but does she have any rights? She
should have rights. She does have rights, but it looks like there may have been some kind of manipulation. Maybe Saul said David was dead, or maybe Saul said that by virtue of his rebellion, the king has the ability to sever all. There must have been some kind of conspiracy where Saul convinced everyone that this is an acceptable step. Again, this doesn't endear Saul to us, right?
No.
And so we have this problem. We have this problem of what's going on. Is David going to get back his wife? And of course, the answer is David's going to get back his wife.
So
Um,
David is going to end up with 3 wives now, right?
David is going to end up with 3 wives, but there's of course a lot of drama. Remember, Michal originally saves David's life when Saul wants to kill him. So it's
Oh,
not like
yeah.
she doesn't like him, but she must have been placed in some kind of weird, strange arrangement. And again, she was probably very, very vulnerable. To be a princess in the palace, you have, in a way, access to riches, but in a way, you have less freedom than a regular person. And it must have been really,
Mhm.
really difficult. Hold on one second. So you got another problem here. Problem is, it sounds like, although there was a temporary truce, they didn't entirely make up. And Saul now, either this is an earlier event that's out of order, or they are back.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
They are back in a conflict. So the Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah and said, "Hey, David's hiding in the hills of Achila, facing Yeshimon." So this sounds like a familiar story.
Yeah, right.
So this may be a flashback, or this may be a new hostility. Saul went down to the wilderness of Ziph with 3,000 men to search for David. Saul encamped on the hills of Achila, facing Yeshimon. When David, who was living in the wilderness, learned that Saul had come after him, and David sent scouts to make sure that Saul had come. And then David went at once to the place where Saul had encamped. David saw the spot where Saul and his commander, Avner, son of Ner, were asleep. Saul lay aside a fortress, a defensive position. Troops posted about him. David spoke up among his men and asked Achimelech the Hittite, Avishai, son of Zerah, Yoav's brother, "Who will go down with me to the camp of Saul?" So Avishai says, "I'll go with you." Avishai approached the troops, found Saul asleep, his spear in the ground, and all of the men are sleeping around him. And Avishai said to David, "God has delivered your enemy into your hands today. You pin him to the ground with a single thrust of the spear. I won't have to strike him twice." They have an opportunity to kill Saul.
Mm-hmm.
And David says, "Do not do him violence. Don't lay hands on the Lord's anointed with impunity." So once again, David has a chance to take out his enemy, to become the undisputed leader, and he resists that. And once again, he says, "As the Lord lives, the Lord himself will strike him down. Or his time will come or he will die, or he'll go to battle and perish. But Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Just take the spear, the water jar at his head, and let's be off." So they steal his royal spear and his royal jug, but they refused to touch them. David took the spear, the water, they left. No one saw or knew or woke up. All remained asleep, a deep sleep that God made as a miracle. David crossed to the other side, stood afar atop the hill when there was a distance. And he called to the troops and Abner, the general. "Abner, aren't you going to answer? Who are you to shout at the king?" said Abner. David said, "You are a man, aren't you? There's no one like you in Israel. So why aren't you watching your king? One of our troops came to do violence to your king. You are not doing a good job. You deserve to die because you're not protecting the king. Look around. Where's the king's spear and the water jar that was at his head?" So I know I'm reading a little fast over here. Basically, David takes the stuff and now he taunts Saul's protective detail that they didn't do a good job. Saul recognized David's voice and said, "Is that your voice, my son David?" They're chasing him. He wants to kill him, but there seems to be this, almost schizophrenic or what's the right word? Unstable dynamic between David and Saul. He said, "Why does the Lord continue to pursue me? What have I done? What am I guilty of? Now let my Lord, the king, hear his servant out. If the Lord has incited you against me, let him be appeased by an offering. But if there are men that are poisoning you against me, let them be accursed by the Lord, because they have driven me out. So I will not have a share in the Lord's possession, but I'm told, go worship other gods." David's saying they're trying to push me out of the Jewish faith. They're trying to make me a fugitive. Let my blood not fall to the ground away from the presence of the Lord, for the king of Israel has come out to seek a single flea, as if he was hunting a partridge in the hills. So David once again is using this poetic language to say, what's going on over here? Who's poisoning you against me? Why are you chasing me like this? And Saul said, I am wrong. Come back, my David, my son David, for I will never harm you again. Seeing how you have held my life precious this day. Yes, I've been a fool, and I've erred so very much. Is this the second time? This seems a little bit like deja vu.
Yeah.
And David said, here is your majesty's spear. Let one of your men come and get it. And the Lord will requisite every man for his right conduct and loyalty. For this day the Lord delivered you into my hands, and I would not raise a hand against the Lord's anointed. Just as I valued your life highly this day, so may the Lord value my life. May he rescue me from all trouble. And Saul said to David, may you be blessed, my son David. You shall achieve and you shall prevail. David went on his way, and Saul returned home. So in today's fairly rushed session, we find out that David had some trouble with a guy named Nabal. His wife intervened, saves the day, and ultimately manages to get a proposal from the king, which she graciously accepts. Although there's 3 wives, again, in the time of the Bible, this was apparently something that was somewhat prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
We then have David on the run from Saul again. And David once again has the opportunity to kill Saul, but instead of doing so, he takes a trophy, evidence that he could have taken his life, and he uses that once again to make a strong emotional appeal to once and for all time make peace between Saul and David. And Saul once again is gracious in his response. Although if I was David, I would be a little wary of Saul after having this conversation too many times. I just want to read the first line and then we're going to stop.
So
David realizes that there's something unstable about Saul.
He
gives David, then he chases him.
What chapter are we in the book of Samuel?
I'm sorry?
What chapter and verse is this story of Miguel and Abigail and Abigail? What
David and Abigail is 25. The next thing, chapter
25.
Chapter 25.
Chapter 25.
Yes, and then chapter 26 is the second encounter of David and Saul, and it is now the first verse of chapter 27, which we're going to end, where David says to himself, "I cannot be too convinced by Saul's words. If this keeps up, I'm eventually going to perish at the hands of Saul."
He doesn't trust him. He
doesn't trust him. Saul's lost his ability to be trusted. The
Right.
best thing for me is to flee to the land of the Philistines. Saul will give up hunting me throughout the territory of Israel, and I'll escape. And so David and 600 men crossed into the territory of King Achish, son of Moach of Gath. And so David once again is on the run, and it is on this matter that we will, God willing, pick up.
Right.
2 weeks. Next week is Passover, with the following week, the 26th. God willing, we'll pick up.
That's good. Good stories today.
Yes, I'm sorry to cut this a little short. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Joy and Shira. And
Thank you. Happy Passover.
Happy Passover to everybody.
Shira, when are you traveling?
I'm leaving Thursday and I'll be back Tuesday night.
Very nice. Well, have a
So I'll see you
wonderful
for the end of the holiday.
Passover.
I'll see you Friday night, the end of the holiday, probably.
Great. All right, everyone. Thank you so
Is
much.
Friday night by you or at the shul?
I'm sorry, Seder.
Is Friday night? No, like the end of the holiday.
Yeah, be in touch with Shane. That's probably my house.
Okay.
All right, take care, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.